Can I fight off 10 waves of evil rock monsters? Whether it's through extorting the lands of natural resources, building an excessive amount of walls, or spamming the ancient magics, I'm gonna do what it takes. Today I survived 10 waves of Castle Story. As all great stories start, I had my 5 minions, citizens, set up a home crystal. This was the heart of our society. It gave these guys life. If the crystal was destroyed, well, you don't want to know what happened. It appeared that we had a plentiful amount of stone, iron, brimstone, trees, and plants around our settling location. Now that's what I call a good start. I knew that I couldn't waste any time at all because some evil rock monsters were coming to attack our crystal. We only had 14 minutes until their arrival. So I gave the order to cut down as many trees as we possibly could in a certain radius. My hard workers got chopping away. They had already taken down at least 7 trees within the first 30 seconds. Now that is impressive. One log even fell off the side of our floating island because they were cutting down the trees so quickly. Since we already had a good amount of wood, I decided it was time to place down a chopping block. We could now chop the logs into planks. Oh no, not another one. The chopping block wasn't very expensive to build. It only cost 1 wood. Right when it was constructed, one of my workers had brought in over a log. They started chopping away at it, and it turned into 3 planks. We were building up a steady supply of wood and planks. The only thing is, I needed a place to put it all. I couldn't just leave it scattered on the ground like it is right now. I ended up placing down 10 stockpiles. This would serve as a place to store all of the resources that we were gathering. My minions immediately started working towards building them. One of them grabbed the planks that we currently had and started laying them out, while one of the others started chopping more logs. Now that is good teamwork. I then communicated to my minions that the very first 5 stockpiles closest to the trees were going to be used for logs, and the other 5 were going to be used for planks. That was when I shifted my focus to the nearest stones. I really didn't want to deal with the stone being scattered across the ground, so I placed down some stockpiles before I gave the order to mine. 3 of my workers immediately stopped what they were doing and ran over to the stockpile to grab some planks. They then started laying down the planks to create our brand new stone storage area. Well, at least that's what it was supposed to be. Some of my minions started placing down the planks that they were carrying onto the new stockpiles. That's what made me remember that I needed to change all of these to accept only stone. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more. If you want to get more involved in the Vortide community, check out my Discord linked down below. There's some incredible lore that links the videos together, as well as a really cool leveling system. Join now. It's time to mine. I gave the order to start mining all of the stone in the nearby deposit. It looked like my workers had chopped down all of the trees that I ordered. This allowed 4 of them to head over to the stone and start hitting away. It looked like at least one was still chopping planks. Well, we now had wood and stone. It was now time to start gathering some plants, which having plant fibers will allow us to create ropes and fabric. I did the usual, placing down more storages and giving the order to gather plants. We really were making a lot of progress in such a short time. We already had wood, stone, and plant fiber. Now, all that was left was iron and brimstone. Before we start gathering those resources though, I want to make sure that we have at least some weapons in preparation for the attack. I placed down 2 weapon racks so that way we could store items for 2 different types of units. After that, I placed down a workbench. It really didn't require that many materials, only 6 planks. While that was building, I knew that I had secured a way to get some weapons. So it felt like an appropriate time to place down some stockpiles and start mining the local iron deposit. This went exactly as expected. Hey, look, the workbench finally finished. I was given the option of being able to build a lantern ward, an archer kit, and a halberd kit. Out of the 2 sets, it seemed like the archer one was a lot more feasible. I ended up ordering one to be made. I didn't realize it at first, but the kit required rope and fabric, which I didn't have. Well, at least not yet. I needed to make some. This could be done at a loom, which I still had to build. I was a little nervous that we weren't going to get it built in time. We only had 6 minutes until the invasion. A random yellow light was circling around my home crystal. I ended up finding out that this was essence for another worker, so I spawned one in. Having an extra worker makes things a lot easier. We can now complete more tasks in a shorter amount of time. Time was ticking down, and at 5.5 minutes till the invasion, the loom had finished. I ordered the production of 1 fabric and 1 rope to be made as soon as possible. That way we can finally finish constructing the archer kit. I just realized that there wasn't a stockpile for these new materials, so I ended up placing down 2 behind the workbench as well as the loom. We were so close to getting our archer kit. One of my workers had just finished the bow itself. We now just needed the quiver with arrows and the hat. Thankfully enough, these didn't take long at all. We had all of the supplies that we needed to craft them, which made things a lot easier. Alright, let's take a look at the archer unit. I had one of my workers equip the archer kit. This is what we'll have against the monsters on the first wave. It's not anything spectacular, but it'll have to do. Alright, that's enough modeling for now. Get back to work. It was pretty nice because in addition to being able to use the home crystal to spawn workers, I could also use it to tell everyone to grab their combat gear, get back to work, or even all run to the crystal. That last one will be good for any emergencies. It seemed like we had a decent amount of iron saved up, so I built a furnace. We'd be able to utilize this to smelt the iron into iron bars. It also appeared that we could make glass bars. Since we now had a furnace, it seemed like a good idea to try and make a halberd kit. It really wasn't that expensive. I honestly thought it was going to cost more iron than it did. The halberd itself was crafted very quickly. The helmet, on the other hand, was taking forever. It wasn't even being produced actually. That's when I headed over to the furnace, and I saw that brimstone was required to make an iron bar. In a rush, I placed down a little order to mine some brimstone. We needed to get this iron bar produced before the enemies attacked in exactly 2 minutes. I might as well set up the storages too, since we're going to be mining over here already. I took full control over the 1 minion who was mining the brimstone. I told him that he had to pick it up and immediately bring it over to the furnace. Once the brimstone made it there, I then had sent him over to pick up some iron and bring that back to the furnace. The iron bar was being produced, slowly but surely. Only 1 minute remained until our very first invasion. I was a little bit on edge about this. I wanted to make sure that we had at least 1 ranger kit and 1 halberd kit. I honestly wasn't even sure how strong our enemies were gonna be, so I wanted to make sure that we were prepared. Let's go, the iron bar finished. We now had our halberd set and ranger set ready to go. The invasion began. I used my crystal to tell everyone to gear up and then come back to it. Our main priority for this defense was to keep the crystal in one piece. As I said earlier, you don't want to find out what happens if it gets destroyed, so we're not going to let it come to that. I saw our very first enemy running up the elevation to our home base. It looked like there were only 2 of them. This was a huge relief because we outnumbered them quite a bit. We also had some weapons, and they just had their fists. But then again, they are made out of rock, so that would really hurt to get punched by one of them. We had taken down the very first rock monster. It was now time to focus in on the second one. He really wasn't that hard to take out, but one of my minions dropped down to half health, so I was a little bit concerned. Right as the rock monster was defeated, a purple orb had popped out of him. I really wasn't sure what this thing was, or what it did. I just saw it heading back towards our home crystal. Hey, maybe it'll give it some more power. As the orb made its way over, I had my minions do the same. I told them to put down any of the combat gear and get back to work. The other stone mine had been completely depleted. Luckily enough, there was another stone source nearby, so I told my workers to get mining. Oh, and of course, I built a new stockpile right next to the stone source. Wave 1 seemed like it was too easy, so I figured that Wave 2 was going to be a lot harder. It seemed like a good idea to start working on a wall and a door to prevent any of the enemy monsters from being able to get in. I didn't really have a lot of stone saved up, so I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to wall off both sides that the enemies come from. Nevertheless, I'm gonna try. I first started off placing down a reinforced door. Then I put some bricks to the left and right of it. On the left side, I had then placed down a corner and started leading it all the way to the edge. This ensured that the monsters wouldn't be able to get in from any side. I even started stacking the wall 3 high just to make sure no one tried to climb over it. The sides were a bit uneven, but it'll do for now. My workers started grabbing as many bricks as they could, bringing them over and putting them in place. I then headed over to the other choke point that we could wall off. Just like on the other side, I started off with a door, and then I placed bricks on each side of the door. I wanted to keep things consistent, so I ended up stacking these walls to 3 high as well. We had around 6 minutes until the next wave of enemies was going to arrive. I had full confidence that we would be able to wall off at least the first side of the base before the next wave. In addition to building some walls, I also placed down an altar and then a forge. So not only will the enemies of next wave have to deal with walls, they're also going to have to deal with 2 more unit types. My goal was to make it a lot harder for the invaders to invade us than it was for us to defend against them. If I can pull that off, then surviving waves is gonna be easy. I was gonna need a decent amount of iron to build this new forge, and also everything in it, so I spammed iron bars to be made at the furnace. Time was flying by as I made stockpile renovations. I started to doubt that the forge and altar were gonna be finished by the time of the next wave, so I started making another halberd kit. If we weren't going to get the unit types from the forge and altar, then it only made sense to have a couple extra halberd and ranger kits. Speaking of rangers, I had a pretty good idea. I wanted to build a tower or wall, so that way the rangers can stand on this little elevation area and shoot down at the monsters trying to attack our walls. At least for now, we're going to keep this thing simple. When the halberd kit finished, I ordered another ranger kit. This will mean that for the next attack, we'll have 2 ranged and 2 melee. I made the call to arms because wave 2 was beginning. My workers turned into military units, and they were ready for the battle. Now, we just gotta wait and see what side the enemies are going to attack from. I was really hoping that it was gonna be the lower elevation side. The walls were completed over here, and on the other side, we didn't even finish the door. And of course, they attacked the side that's incomplete. The rock monsters entered my base like they owned it. That's when I sent my melee in to handle the situation. My archers were also shooting at the rock monsters from far away. We had the situation under control. I was pretty surprised because I thought this was going to be a lot harder. The 3 rock monsters were slightly bigger than the 2 that we faced from the last invasion. Well, that was easy. I was very proud of my troops because they were way over prepared for this battle. That's exactly how I wanted to keep it. I did some reconnaissance and received some intel that I'm going to be taking on 5 of the 3rd largest rock monsters in the next wave. So my priority for the time in between was to keep building up the wall and get the forge and altar finally completed. Also maybe build some more archer or halberd kits if need be. We were making great progress. The door on the second wall was now completed and we were laying down the second layer of the wall. I gave the order to clear out some of the shrubbery that was near our home crystal. I also ordered a whole bunch of iron bars to be smelted. With all of these improvements going on, I decided to add another layer to the left side of the wall on my lower elevation side. I then found a blueprint for some random traps that I could build. I ended up placing some in front of each door that I had. Even though I didn't have any of these traps made yet, I wanted to make sure that they got placed down the second that we did. It became nighttime, and thankfully enough, the forge completed. This allowed me to order 2 night kits to be created. I also ordered another ranger kit to be constructed as well. Strangely enough, the altar was never built. The blueprint for it even disappeared. So I ordered the construction of another one. Hopefully they actually build it this time. Unfortunately enough, the brimstone and iron deposits ran out in our base. I went and found some nearby and ordered that they get mined. It was going to get harder the longer that we held out because we were going to need to go further and further just to get resources. My troops headed out to start mining the new node. I ended up telling them not to go and to come and arm up for the next invasion. The monsters were going to be here in less than a minute, so I didn't want everybody rushing back to the crystal while our walls were under attack. Everyone was geared up and it was now a waiting game. The enemies were attacking with 2 more troops this time, but we also had 2 more military units. We had a clear advantage this wave, especially considering that we had walls. I don't really think it's going to be the same next round, because if the enemy units double again, then we're going to be outnumbered. While we were waiting, I was able to craft a light ward and place it down. Honestly, that wasn't worth it. We could see just fine in the dark. I started to get my troops in position on the lower elevation side. They didn't attack from over here last time, so I figured they would. I was wrong. All 5 of the rock monsters were attacking from the same side as last invasion. I had my melee units rush to the door and start stabbing out at the enemies. My archers really couldn't get a good view on them, so they were being kinda useless in this situation. One of the bricks had broken off my wall. I thought this was a bad thing at first because the monsters only needed to break one more, but my archers finally had a view on them. So this sped up the process of taking out the enemies. There we go, the last one's down. I recalled all of my troops back to the crystal and told them to ungear. I then gave a repair order on the wall that had just been attacked. We for sure needed to make repairs. Since this side was so popular and it kept getting attacked, I decided it would be a good idea to build a staircase to a higher elevation spot where my archers could shoot down at the enemies attacking the walls. So that's exactly what I started to do. I built a pretty large staircase. This idea is honestly 200 IQ. I started to look over at the armor and weapon sets. It was a little bit strange because one of the knight sets was completely separated. I hope we could still use it. I had another great idea. I wanted to wall off the home crystal. The only thing is I had stockpiles in the way, so I couldn't really do that now. I'll worry about that later, but I definitely want to get it done. My workers finished off the staircase pretty quickly. The only thing we had to do now was clear out all of the trees up there. I was very frustrated. The altar never got constructed, even though it's been just sitting there. So I ordered that another one get made along with a machine shop. I had also realized that the wall was beyond repair in certain areas, so I had to just start new and put some new bricks down. The machine shop finished building before the altar. That's when I realized I could build those traps that I laid out blueprints for. Oh no, I forgot about the invasion. I told everyone to arm up and get ready to fight off the evil rock monsters. Thankfully enough, I was able to get everyone geared up before the monsters actually arrived. Well, except one person. We had another knight kit, and unfortunately, my minions couldn't put it on. They were only able to pick up a piece for it, and that was it. I think one of the workers was even frustrated as he ended up throwing a log super far. Now that's a good arm. The enemies finally started to stage their invasion from the lower elevation side. I was pretty happy about this because we had the best defenses on this side. I even had my archers go to the side of the cliff and start shooting arrows down at the enemies attacking the wall. Even though they could do this on the other side, it seemed like they had a better field of view over here. Honestly, having these walls was super overpowered. I was taking out the enemies with ease. It was a little bit weird though because I was getting an indicator of another giant enemy moving in to attack us. I'm really hoping we're prepared for this guy because he's attacking from the other side all alone. It definitely did make things a lot easier considering he wasn't attacking from the same side that the other enemies were on. Well, here goes nothing. When I finally saw this unit, I realized he wasn't anything special. He was just like the other troops. I have no idea why he was so slow or so far behind, but it gave me a good scare. I thought he was going to be a lot more powerful than the other enemies. After a few stabs and a couple arrows, we had taken him out. As usual, I told my troops to get back to work. After the invasion, I did the usual of giving a repair order. I then told my workers to start mining at this new iron node and ordered an artificer kit to be made. I was able to do this because the altar had finally finished. I'm not really sure why, but this magic wand is taking forever to craft. I was really hoping that this thing would be built by now. After doing some investigating, I realized it was because we didn't have enough iron bars made. This gave me the idea to place down another furnace. That way we could produce the bars at twice the speed, or I could also just have one for iron and one for glass. Another invasion was already on the way. It was weird because it seemed like we had less and less time to prepare between invasions. This wasn't the case because I knew that we were getting the same amount of time, but it sure felt that way. I had a feeling that the enemies were going to be attacking from the side with the staircase, and surely enough, they did. To be fair though, they attacked from that side more times than not. One of my minions that had no gear on ran outside to continue mining. I had forgotten to tell everyone to stop working. This was a little bit stunning because he came back inside of the fort with only half health. He could have died out there. The invasion continued on, and my archers couldn't really get a clear shot on all of the enemies. I had to tell them to move around until they finally did. Once they did get a good position though, we were raining down arrows on the enemies. I even sent out my melee units to take out the monsters near the door. This was to speed up the defense of the attack. I realized that we were still fighting off the rock monsters and we only had around 8.5 minutes until the next invasion. I guess I technically was right about having less time in between waves. We weren't able to kill the monsters as fast because they were getting a lot stronger, so this in turn made us spend a lot more time in the preparation phase to try and actually kill the monsters that were still remaining. I guess what that means is we're gonna have to start making improvements a lot quicker. That's exactly what I did. I started adding on to the wall that we were gonna use as leverage to shoot down arrows on the enemy monsters. I also ordered the furnaces to start making iron and glass bars, and ordered a whole bunch of wards to be made at the altar. With the wall taking quite a beating in the last invasion, I decided that it would be a good time to double up. So I placed down another door and started laying out some bricks so we could have another wall. This one ended up being a bit longer than the one behind it. I made this wall 1 block shorter than the second one. I didn't want to use all of my stone just creating this wall. I also had to keep in mind that I needed to double wall the other side too. Before doing that though, let's make sure that we actually have enough stone. I told my workers to start excavating a brand new stone node. I was proud of what we had going on here. We had a whole little system. The population of our little town, I guess you could say, was at 9, which was a big increase from 5. Most of the wards that I had ordered to be crafted finally finished. I ended up using some of the pylon wards, or the blue ones, to set up a little path so I could place down one of the sentinel wards, one that attacks enemies. I ended up placing it right in front of the wall that my archers use for elevation. This allows the ward to shoot, and it also doesn't block any of the ranged units from being able to shoot. I ended up adding a healing ward right at the front door as well. That way, when I have my melee troops trying to attack the enemies from behind the door, they can also get healed. Only 30 seconds remained until the next invasion. So I headed over to the home crystal and told everybody to grab their weapons. I was super excited to test out the Artificer. Their magic wand gave them the ability to attack enemies, but also heal teammates. So it's pretty much the healing and sentinel ward combined. I still wasn't sure what side the enemies were going to attack from. So I put 2 of the ranged units on one side and 2 on the other. Well, at least I was trying to, and then I started seeing all the enemies rushing in. My archers started firing away, but the enemies were throwing rocks back. I honestly didn't even know that they could do this. So my melee units went out to distract them and get them a little bit closer to the wall. This made the rock monsters start attacking the wall. Now we could actually use our melee against them, and also my ranged units can just shoot at them like normal. We were dealing with an abnormally large rock monster this round. He had an insane amount of health, but didn't really do too much damage, thankfully. So I made sure that all my ranged units were focusing in on only him. Every once in a while, one of my melee units would get hit. Thankfully enough, I had that healing ward. This allowed me to keep that unit in the battle, because if I didn't have them getting healed, it wouldn't be safe to have them attacking any more enemies. Right as the giant rock monster had been defeated, I sent my melee infantry out to finish the job. It's always super satisfying to see the troops come back and put down all of their gear. Workers by day, fighters by night. I figured it would be a good time as ever to place down my second wall on the lower elevation side. This ended up creating a little airlock. This would be a great area to trap monsters inside of and take out with ease. My game plan was to use it as a way to let a few monsters in and take them out while the rest of the enemies were sitting outside attacking the walls. Let's get this thing built. All of this building must have inspired our minion to be ready to be spawned in. Welcome, new guy. Get to work. I almost had one of every weapon kit built. One of the ones that I was missing was an arbalist, so I added it to our production queue. I also had the forge start making gears. 2 of them were required for the kit. I then ordered a new pylon and sentinel ward to be placed down. I really wanted to make sure that I had a ward on this side so it could protect against the enemies in case of a 2-front assault. Things are really coming together over here. We were doing a really good job of filling the stockpile with iron ore, so I had to build some more. After queuing some more sentinel wards and making more iron ingots, it was already time for the next invasion. I was a little bit late to this one. My troops weren't even in position to defend. Unfortunately, the enemies had beaten us to the wall. Luckily enough, we were defending and not attacking, so it wasn't a big deal. I don't know why, but my ranged units weren't being fully utilized, so I had to manually tell them that they needed to move over to a different location. This was honestly a good thing because it helped me discover a flaw in my airlock. My archers didn't have to use a door, and they were able to climb over some dirt to get into it. That really needs to be fixed. While being distracted with the current enemies, I noticed there were some other ones attacking the other side of the base. I sent over my ranged units to go and handle the situation, at least until my melee could get in position. It looked like there was still a decent amount of enemies making their way over. I thought the raid was almost over, not still going on. It wasn't long until I could bring my melee over to help. They finished taking out all of the enemies on the other side and could now assist. It didn't take them very long to clean up the whole situation. Now that was a long invasion. We only have 7.5 minutes to prepare for the next one. Oh wait, what the heck? There's more enemies? The invasion wasn't over. There still was one enemy that needed to be dealt with. Even though it was only one enemy, I need to make sure I keep my guard up in the future. If I told everyone to put their weapons away, and we had a delayed attack with more than just one, then that could be a sticky situation. Immediately, when the raid ended, I filled in the gap that I saw my archers use to get into the airlock. I really didn't have any big goals besides that for this next preparation phase. I even almost ended up skipping it, but I decided not to, just in case there was something that I wanted to do. Surely enough, I found something. I ended up adding a layer of bricks to one of my walls. Now that I knew we had enough stone to do so, it seemed like an appropriate time. And I wasn't using this time for anything else, so it just made sense. The only other thing that I could think of to do during this time was to place down another sentinel ward. When I say one, I actually mean two. I was honestly considering placing down a third one, but that was when I saw the catapult. This thing has gotta be crazy. The only thing is, I would be afraid that it would accidentally destroy some of my walls. So I gotta be careful where I place it, and be smart about it. Alright boys, it's time for war again. Gear up. It looked like the rock monsters were only attacking from one side this round. That's a nice change of pace. As they approached the base wall, my 3 sentinel turrets started immediately firing. These things were overpowered. It was almost like they were rapid fire. I was super happy that I had them, because it seemed like this new monster that I was fighting could also shoot magic back. What the heck? It also spawned in one of those little rock monsters in between my walls. So you're telling me this thing's pretty much a tank, can shoot magic, and spawn in enemy minions? Now that's just unfair. We were doing our best to hold out, but a bunch of minions kept spawning in between the 2 walls. This was super frustrating because I couldn't focus on the larger guy with my melee. I had to take out the enemies that were already inside of my walls. The first wall has been breached. Retreat, retreat! The enemy rock monsters managed to break through the first wall. I had to retreat my melee back in one. I also decided that it would be a good idea to send my Anticifer down and turn them to healing mode. If I was going to keep these melee units in the fight, I needed to make sure that they could get heals when needed. It only took the enemies a short amount of time to break through the second wall. Darn it, I should have made sure that it was fully repaired. Is this the end right here? Right now? I didn't want this to be the end. But I was a little bit concerned because it seemed like this big guy was never gonna die. That wasn't until I sent my melee troops to go full aggro on him. I kinda just ignored the other little rock monsters that were around and focused in on that big one. This might have not been the best idea, because one enemy had slipped past and was already attacking my crystal. So I made all of my troops run back to the crystal and start defending it. I also spawned in the new minion who was ready to be spawned in. I think the raid's over. I don't see any more enemies. That was absolutely brutal. We almost didn't survive. Both walls had been breached and the crystal had been attacked. I really need to make sure that I'm ready for this next wave. Also, I'm really hoping that it takes place on the other side. I wasted no time at all and started rebuilding the walls that had gotten destroyed. I guess not only was it the walls, it was also a door and 3 of my sentinel turrets. I replaced all 3 of them and even put down a healing ward nearby. Oh, and I replaced the traps. I really didn't want to have a repeat of what happened during that last raid. The crystal was completely under attack and I didn't even notice. So I finally started building a wall around it. This is something that I should have done a while ago because it's kind of like a last failsafe in case any enemies slip by. I really only planned on making this 2 blocks tall. I also put a block on the inside so that way any minions in there could step up and defend it from the walls if need be. As usual, my hard workers got to work. They started placing down the stones as quickly as they possibly could, as I'm sure they knew the importance of getting this thing up before the next wave. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, I've been mass producing the sentinel wards. I placed around 9 in the base. This should make things a little bit more easy. I put all of my eggs in one basket. This probably wasn't a good idea, but I did it anyways. I was certain that we were going to be attacked from this side, and surely enough, we were. I saw the enemies moving in very slowly. As they came in range, my sentinel turrets started firing away. So did all of my ranged units. This seemed like it was pretty overpowered, because we just had constant arrows and magic flying out towards the enemies. The one giant enemy that we were dealing with was also just completely getting melted. He had a lot of health, but it was going down super quickly. I had then noticed that there was another huge enemy on the other side of the castle. This was the biggest type of enemy that we can encounter. My turrets were completely melting him though, so I really wasn't that concerned. I did end up sending over all of my ranged troops because I didn't want any of the sentinel wards to be destroyed. Sadly enough though, they did end up getting destroyed. I was a bit sad about this because I knew that I was going to have to build more of them. But we had a lot of materials, so this wouldn't be too bad. Before I knew it, the battle was over. That went a lot more smoothly than the last wave. I honestly think that we owe it all to the sentinel wards. Those things come in handy. I replaced the ones that had gotten destroyed and added an extra one. I actually ended up adding an extra one to each side. If they melted the biggest and baddest enemy type that quickly, I was gonna be sure to add as many as I possibly could. Maybe even one day we'll have 20 in a row. That would be cool. I used the 7 minutes of preparation time to finish building up the little box around my home crystal and building more wards. Nothing too exciting. My minions also did continue mining away at the stone nodes that were super far away, but we had to do what we had to do. There was only 1 minute left until we were on our 10th wave of invasion. That was okay though, because the walls around the crystal had just finished being built. Oh yeah, and I threw a sentinel ward on top of them just for good measure. I was really proud to see my 5 melee, 6 ranged, and over 10 sentinel wards. This base had the best defense that it's ever had. The enemy rock monsters ended up pouring into our field of view. This time there were 15 in total, and it was all of the smaller to medium-sized rock monsters. I was pretty relieved that we didn't have to fight off any of the big monsters. 15 enemies was quite a lot though, but they melted like butter. Between the wards and my ranged units, we were able to take these guys out really quickly. Now this is what I call an ideal attack. Well, I guess no attack would be ideal, but this is a good second. I haven't been able to utilize my melee troops yet. Hey, that's actually a really good idea. Let's send them out there. Of course, once they made it outside of that door, it was GG. Since all of the enemy troops had been taken care of, I sent all of our units back into the center of our base. I was really proud of all of them, because we had survived 10 waves of Castle Story.